But of course, if you want to ask a question, speak up. Okay. I'm just going to take a photo for my boss of the list of our attendees this evening. Start the Instagram live recording and we will get underway. All right. Beautiful. Let's get started, shall we?
Yep.
Nice. I'll quickly share my screen to talk through what we're going through. We're going to start off by speaking about the differences between vegetarian and vegan diets. All right. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of them. Some of you may be following the diets yourselves. We're going to speak about the little differences between the two diets. Okay. Following that, we're going to talk about some of the benefits to plant-based eating and what can actually offer us as human beings, as well as to the environment itself. We're going to go through some of the drawbacks or potential risks of the diet and what we need to, and then eventually go on to what we need to pay particular attention to for our health and for our overall performance. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll stop sharing my screen now. Okay. And like I said, at any time, if you've got a question, feel free to pop it in the chat or pop your microphone on and speak out loud. Up to you, whichever one you'd like, okay? Good evening to Instagram. Thank you for joining this evening. We're talking vegetarian and vegan diets, okay? Apologize, I'm not looking at you. I'm looking up at the Zoom recording, all right? Cool, let's get started. The differences between a vegan and a vegetarian diet. Right? So both of them are plant-based, which means a majority of their energy and their nutrients comes from plant-based foods, whether that be fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. So that's where a predominant amount of their energy and nutrients comes from, okay? Vegetarians are different from vegans in that they, depending on the specific vegetarian diet they follow, they also choose to consume dairy, so milk, cheese, yogurts, so derivatives of milk, as well as eggs from chickens, okay? So they're essentially vegans, but they also choose to consume eggs and or dairy if they choose to do so. Vegans are vegetarians who consume no animal products whatsoever. They don't have dairy, they don't consume eggs, some don't consume honey from bees, okay? That's the predominant differences between the two diets, the predominant summary differences between the two, okay? Cool. Let's move on to some of the benefits, okay, of predominantly plant-based eating, all right? The first one is a reduction in meat intake from a health perspective, right? There's nothing inherently wrong from a health perspective from meat as per se. However, Australians and a lot of the Western world eat way too much meat. There's new guidelines recommending for those who consume meat to try and have less than 350 grams of red meat a week at absolute tops, preferably less. So a key benefit of a vegetarian or a vegan diet is that it restricts meat, which Australians need to do more of, whether we do it entirely or whether we just cut back a little bit on meat, okay? In terms of the specific meats that people are eating, if let's say they consume predominantly highly saturated fat meats that aren't very lean, they're at increased risk of heart disease, okay? So in saying that, plant-based eaters won't be consuming any meat, including the saturated fat or high fat meats. Therefore, they're at lower risk of cardiovascular disease than their meat-eating counterparts in that regard, okay? So there's one first benefit. Another one, predominant one, is increased fiber intake. And again, this will depend specifically on what is within the diet. If we're eating only white rice and white bread, that's a vegan diet, but that's very low in fiber. But let's assume that it's very high in fruit and vegetables, beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. Vegans and vegetarians are more likely to consume more fiber than their meat-eating counterparts, just because they're getting more of their energy and nutrients from predominantly plant-based foods, okay? And fiber is only found in plant-based foods. Fiber is what contributes to plants' structures, plants and seeds structures, okay? Fiber is important for many different aspects of our health, okay? Predominant one is our digestion. I'm sure many of you know. It helps us to maintain regularity with going to the bathroom, okay? It also feeds our gut microbiota, the bacteria in our gut. Helps provide them with their foods, and in turn, when they eat it, they spit things out, which is good for our gut lining, okay? And fiber is also good at helping us reduce the amount of cholesterol and glucose in our food as well. So it can be protective against heart disease as well, okay? Similar to what I just spoke about, and I've already touched on it, vegetarians and vegans are more likely to consume more fruit and vegetables, okay? And whole grains, which contribute, like I just spoke about, to increased fiber intake, which is very beneficial for our health. But it's also more likely to contribute more vitamins and more minerals and more antioxidants to our diet, which have numerous wide-reaching benefits in our body, okay? More fruit and vegetables will particularly provide more vitamin C, okay? If you were here a few weeks ago, I covered vitamin C in quite a bit of detail. A lot more vitamin A and K, folate, as well as higher amounts of potassium, which can help to counteract, if you like, high amounts of sodium in many Western diets, okay? So long story short there, vegetarian, vegan diets are more likely to be higher in fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and total fiber content, okay? Now, moving away from the nutrition perspective and more onto an environmental perspective, many people, this is something I learned quite a bit early on in my university year this year, meat production and the meat industry has significant impacts upon our earth and upon our atmosphere, the ozone layer. I won't go into too much detail in regards to the specifics, if you like, but in terms of beef in itself, it requires a lot of water, a lot of land for the beef themselves, and also for food to grow for them. It also emits a lot of methane, which is bad for our ozone layer. So bigger animals like beef, decreasing as the animals get smaller, but I'm using beef as the example, are very unsustainable from an environmental perspective, okay? And 50, 100, 150 years down the track, we're going to have significantly less beef farming in the Western world just because of its impact on the earth, and we can't sustain it forever, okay? So long story short there, vegetarian, vegan diets are, in theory, not in all parts, in theory, more sustainable for our earth, okay? So long story short there, they're beneficial from a fiber, a vitamin, mineral, and antioxidant perspective, as well as being protective against certain disease markers like heart disease, and also is better for our earth, okay, in the long run down the track, okay? I've talked a lot there. Before I move on to some of the potential drawbacks of the diet, has anybody got any questions about what I've just spoken about? Feel free, pop it in the chat or yell it out loud. I don't mind.
Nothing much right now.
You're okay right now? Everybody seems to be going okay?
Yep.
Beautiful. Awesome to hear, okay? Let's move on now to some of the potential risks. Like anything, there's positives and then there's also negatives, and we need to discuss both. So there's plenty of benefits to being predominantly plant-based eaters, but there's also some drawbacks which need to be considered and which we need to be aware of and plan around, which I'll eventually get to, okay? Now, depending on whether we're speaking about a vegan, remember those who consume no animal products at all, or a vegetarian, those who consume dairy and eggs, but just no animal flesh, will depend on the things I'm about to go through, okay? So feel free to pull me up if you want me to clarify, all right? The first one I'll cover is protein. Now, is it impossible to get protein on a plant-based diet? Absolutely not. There are plenty of plant-based sources of protein for vegans, okay? Tofu, beans and legumes are fantastic sources of protein, okay? Nuts and seeds are small sources. We also get some from whole grains, small amounts of protein as well, okay? The only problem with plant-based proteins, apart from soy, like tofu and soybeans, as per se, is that it tends to be lower in quality. And what I mean by that, I spoke about it many weeks ago in an initial protein lecture. Proteins are made of things called amino acids. Think of them as bricks, if you like. They're all different types of bricks. Think of it like that. There's 9 essential ones, which our bodies need to get from food. And there's 11 non-essential ones, which our bodies can make themselves inside us, all right? Animal proteins contain all of the essential ones in the quantities and ratios that we need them in to function optimally and for us to build and maintain muscle. Apart from soy, plant-based proteins, so like I said, from any vegetables which contain small amounts like broccoli, whole grains, nuts and seeds, beans and legumes, with the exception of soy, are lower in these essential amino acids, okay? Because they're lower, they're not as high in quality, and they may not be able to help us build and maintain tissue as well, okay? But there's ways around that. And I'm going to be speaking about it in the next section about how we can plan around these things, okay? But it's just good to be aware that plant-based proteins in a vegan diet aren't as biologically high in quality as animal plant-based proteins. And we need to pay a little bit closer attention to working around that to ensure we're giving our bodies what they need, okay? On a vegetarian diet, we can still get those higher quality animal proteins from milk, cheese, yogurt, and eggs, okay? So have that if there's, as reassurance if there's any vegetarians listening, all right? The next main one I'm going to cover is vitamin B12, okay? Vitamin B12 is very important for many things in our body. The 2 main ones being, number 1, DNA replication or making new cells in our body, okay? Our bodies are constantly making new and breaking down old cells, and to make new ones, we need to be able to build DNA. To be able to do that, we need, amongst many things, we need enough vitamin B12, okay? Vitamin B12 is only found in animal products, whether that be animal flesh or yogurt, milk, cheese, or eggs, okay? In terms of plants, there is no plants out there which contain active vitamin B12 for our bodies. Mushrooms contain some of the substance or molecule, if you like, which resembles vitamin B12, but it's not active in our bodies. Our bodies can't use it properly, so it doesn't actually help to do its job, if you like, in our bodies, okay? So vegans need to pay, I'll go into this more detail in the next one, need to pay attention to that and potentially supplement with vitamin B12, or they do need to supplement with vitamin B12 to ensure they're getting enough of this important nutrient, okay? There is something called nutritional yeast. I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it before. This does contain some vitamin B12. This does contain some vitamin B12. However, we need to pay particular attention to the type because some nutritional yeasts are fortified, others aren't, okay? And only the fortified ones have high quantities of vitamin B12, which are enough. Got a question here in the chat. Can you get vitamin B12 from organic produce? Okay. I covered on mushrooms just before. Organic produce has just been grown without the aid of synthetic fertilizers or synthetic growth agents. Okay. That doesn't directly impact the nutrient content, if you like. Okay. I'm not going to say there's no nutrient differences between organic and non-organic produce. Okay. That's very controversial. There's mostly no significant differences. So in the case of vitamin B12, there's no difference in vitamin B12 no big differences in vitamin B12 between organic and non-organic produce. Okay. In terms of plants, including mushrooms. Mushrooms contain, I covered it just before, the non-active form of vitamin B12, okay? So our bodies can't actually use it as well as it needs to or in the way that it needs to, okay? So the only forms of vitamin B12 on a vegan diet would be supplementation, which a dietitian will be able to help you with, or nutritional yeast and fortified versions of those, which have had some vitamin B12 added. Depending on how much you consume may be enough for you, okay? I'll cover that a little bit more in the next section, okay? The next few that I'll cover are calcium. And again, vegetarians don't need to worry about this because they're consuming or most likely to be consuming dairy, okay? Vegans, again, it's not impossible for you to get calcium. We just need to pay a little bit more attention to it. Calcium is very important, as I'm sure many of you know, for strong, healthy bones and teeth. If we don't get enough calcium in our diets, our bodies are going to need to get it from somewhere to be able to function optimally, okay? Where does it get it from? It takes it from our bones inside of us, which can lead to osteoporosis down the track, and we don't want that, okay? Increased risk of fractures whenever we fall over. We don't want that happening, okay? Iron is another one, okay? Both vegans and vegetarians need to pay particular attention to this one, because although it's not impossible to get enough, again, red meat and animal flesh is probably one of the best sources of bioavailable iron for us. But that's not to say that plant products don't contain it, okay? Yet again, we just need to pay a little bit more attention, which I'll cover in a sec, all right? I'm sure many of you know iron is very important for many aspects in our body. One of the main ones is in something in our blood called hemoglobin. Without hemoglobin, we can't carry oxygen around our bodies and give oxygen to the different parts of our body which need it. For example, our brain, okay? If we're not getting enough oxygen around our body, especially to our brain, it can lead to many risky side effects down the track, okay? An oxygen-starved brain, at the very least, we're likely to faint, and it may prove fatal if it's too severe, okay? So we need enough iron. We need enough iron to be able to carry enough oxygen around our bodies, amongst other things, okay? The last one, which I'll cover, is omega-3, okay? Omega-3, again, is important for many aspects in our body, has been found to assist with inflammation, counteracting inflammation in many different parts of our body, amongst other things. Walnuts and chia seeds are two very good sources of plant-based omega-3. It gives us some, but again, it's not quite as well used in our body. It's not as well converted to the active form in our body, okay? So it's important that we pay particular attention to this and potentially supplement with it as well, okay? I've covered a lot there. I'll quickly summarize before I'll give another question opportunity, okay? Some potential drawbacks of plant-based eating, depending on whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian. Protein is slightly harder to consume enough of for our health, as well as any sort of potential performance goals, okay? Iron and calcium are two minerals which are a lot harder to get unless you're consuming dairy on a vegetarian diet in terms of calcium, okay? And we need to pay a little bit more attention to them, all right? Vitamin B12 is one of the main ones for vegans. There's no plant-based sources of the active form of vitamin 12. We need to supplement with it and or potentially have a lot of nutritional yeast on our food to get enough of it, okay? I'll stop rambling there for a minute or so. Are there any questions about what I've just spoken about then? Feel free to pop it in the chat or to speak out loud.
I just had a question re dairy products. I heard that if you want to lose weight, you cut down on dairy products. Is that a myth or a fact?
It's mostly a myth, okay? I'll say that I'll cover, for those of you watching on Instagram, someone's just asked if we need to cut down on dairy to lose weight, okay? Dairy, or eating dairy by itself, in itself, doesn't cause weight gain, right? So if you drink a glass of milk a day and have some yogurts in the afternoon, it's not causing you to gain or keep weight on your body, okay? It's not directly causing that, okay? The only thing causing you to gain weight or maintain the weight that you're trying to lose is too much total energy intake from all of your food, no matter what it is, compared to the energy that you're expending or putting out or using, if you like, all right? If you're consuming lots and lots and lots of, let's say, full-fat dairy, full-fat cheese, full-fat milk, full-fat cream, all of these sorts of things, it may, depending on many other things, it may be causing you to eat too much energy for your requirements, which may cause you to put on or keep weight on your body, okay? If you consume quite a lot of dairy and you're trying to lose weight, it's potentially a good idea to cut back to low fat or to skim versions like low fat or skim milk, reduced fat or fat free Greek yogurt, lighter cheese if you're trying to lose weight, okay? It's potentially a good idea to cut back to reduced fat versions, but long story short, dairy in itself doesn't cause you to gain weight, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So it's mostly a myth, okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I've got another question now. What's the best plant-based source of protein, in my opinion, to have after a workout? Awesome question. Really, really good question there. There's no best plant-based sources of protein as per se, but what I'm going to go into the next section is what are the higher quality plant-based sources of protein, if you like, or how can we ensure that they're high in quality, all right? Two of the highest quality plant-based protein sources are soybeans and any products made from soybeans, such as tofu and tempeh. They're both awesome sources of protein. I'll repeat, tofu and tempeh are awesome sources. Textured vegetable protein is also another pretty good high-quality source of plant-based protein. And any plant-based protein powders, which contain both rice and a legume protein. So, for example, one brand that I know of is Bondi Protein Co. They've got it in their protein. It's rice and pea protein, I believe. I'll cover it in a moment. Combining both a grain and legume-based protein source increases the plant-based protein quality, okay? It gives us slightly more of those amino acids or building blocks, bricks if you like, which in turn helps us to potentially build or maintain more muscle tissue, okay, than if we were to consume just beans or peas by themselves, okay? Does that answer your question there?
Yeah, I have another question.
Yep.
Are nuts like a little snack, would they suffice after a workout as well?
Nuts by themselves?
Yeah, just as like a snack.
A snack, depending on your goals, of course. About half a palm of nuts are an awesome nutritious snack. They offer you plenty of nutritional benefits, okay? In terms of your protein intake, probably won't cut it, okay? We want a little bit more protein in terms of quality and in terms of quantity. Like I covered it there with tofu, textured vegetable protein, or beans or legumes and whole grains such as rice together in the same meal, or a plant-based protein powder. We probably want to be having these after a workout as per se in a meal to have a high quality source of protein. But later on in the day, as a snack, nuts are a good quality nutritious snack. Okay?
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Beautiful. Let's move on now to the final part. And I'm going to talk about some considerations or some planning we can focus on for a plant-based diet, okay? First one is protein. And I've already touched on this a little bit. I'll quickly go over it again in case anybody missed it. Again, when we consume protein, we consume building blocks or different types of bricks, if you like, okay? Plant-based proteins, with the exception of soybeans, generally don't contain all of these bricks in the quantities and ratios that we need them in as per se, all right? There's ways around that though. Tofu and soybean products are awesome plant-based sources of protein. They're pretty much complete proteins and pretty high quality, okay? Textured vegetable protein is also another type of high quality plant-based protein, if you like, if you want to give that a go. One of the main things that we can do though is pair a legume, such as a beans or legumes as per se, with a whole grain source. Let's use brown rice as an example, okay? If you consume those two together in the same meal, it increases the quality of the protein, if you like, and gives us more of those bricks, amino acids that we need in the quantities that we need them in, okay? And finally, even though we should be prioritizing food first, some plant-based protein powders can come in useful if we're really struggling to hit our protein targets, okay? An example that I covered before was Bondi Protein Co. They're a pretty good plant-based protein source, as well as Bulk Nutrients and VPA. I'll put those in the chat for anybody wanting to know. Bondi Protein Co., VPA, Bulk Nutrients. All of their plant-based protein powders contain both the legume and the grain-based protein source, okay? Like I said, we should be prioritizing food first, but if we're struggling to meet our protein needs through food, then sometimes protein powders can come in useful, okay? Second one is iron, okay? Dark green leafy vegetables, tofu, like I said before, beans and legumes are all good sources of plant-based iron on a vegan diet. However, this iron isn't as well absorbed in our body, okay? So it's harder for us to meet our requirements. A way around that on a vegan diet is by pairing those sources, let's say tofu as an example, with a vitamin C source. Let's say some red capsicum and broccoli in that meal, or an orange on the side of your lunch, or some kiwi fruit, or some berries or something, okay? I say this because vitamin C in our food can help to increase the absorption of plant-based iron, okay? It's important that we're paying particular attention to that because remember, like I said before, iron is very important for carrying oxygen around our body, okay, in our blood. We want to make sure that we're doing that sufficiently, okay? Calcium, again, got to pay particular attention on a vegan diet because calcium sources such as dark green leafy vegetables and almonds are a lot lower in calcium, or we need to eat a lot more of these things to make sure we're getting enough, okay? So one great option is a plant-based milk. For example, almond milks, which are fortified or which have had added to them artificial calcium, okay? I'll pop it in the chat for you. Sanitarium and Vitasoy are two great brands which make sure they put enough calcium into their almond milks or soy milks to make sure that it's up there with the amount of calcium that would be in cow's milk, okay? A reminder, calcium is really important for maintaining strong and healthy bones amongst many other things. If we don't get enough calcium in our diet, our body's going to get it from our bones. And in the future, we're at much higher risk of osteoporosis, and we don't want that happening, okay? Another thing I'll say is if you're looking for plant-based milks, I'll put two options here. We want about 100 milligrams of calcium per 100 mils of plant milks, okay? That's a rough figure to look for when you're choosing your plant-based milks, okay? Vegetarians listening, if you're consuming cow's milk and yogurt and cheese, then you'll be getting, depending on how much you're having, you should be getting enough calcium from those, okay? Finally, like I mentioned before, vitamin B12 is a very important consideration for vegans to watch, okay? Supplementation is almost always necessary. I highly recommend you to look into vitamin B12 supplements. Again, I'll remind you, it's very important for making new cells in our body, as well as for our nervous system to work properly, okay? In the long run, we can have complications with our DNA and with our nervous system if we're not getting enough vitamin B12 in. It's very important, okay? Vegetarians, you should be getting enough from, again, milk, cheese, yogurt, and eggs. However, vegans, it's important that we supplement, or if you're going to be getting some from nutritional yeast, that you, again, look for a fortified version, okay? So look in the ingredients if it has been. I'll also put that in the chat. So B12, supplementation, or fortified, I'll spell that correctly, yep, nutritional yeast. Okay? I'll quickly summarize those things. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me ramble on. Protein, iron, calcium, and vitamin B12 are 4 things we need to pay particular attention to if following a vegan diet as per se. We can consume beans or lentils with things like rice or other whole grains together. Tofu, plant-based protein powders, or textured vegetable protein are all great plant-based protein options for vegans, okay? With iron, try and match a vegan iron source, such as tofu, hard tofu, with a vitamin C source, such as red capsicum, in the same meal to ensure that you're helping to absorb more of that plant-based iron than what would be, okay? For calcium, hard tofu, some dark green vegetables and almonds provide us with a little bit, but we want to really be looking towards fortified products like plant-based milks to give us enough calcium, okay? And finally, vitamin B12 in a vegan diet, we almost always want to be supplementing to ensure that we're getting enough, okay? I'll stop talking there. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me rambling. Are there any questions before we wrap it up this evening on what I've spoken about? Feel free to yell it out loud or pop it in the chat. No questions? You're welcome to pop it in the chat if you don't wanna yell out loud. Nope, that's all right. I hope you've learnt something this evening, okay, about vegetarian and vegan diets. They provide us, or humans and the earth, with many, many, many nutritional benefits and environmental benefits as well. However, there are some drawbacks and some risks if we don't pay particular attention to certain nutrients. And we've got to pay a little closer attention to make sure that we're planning around those, to make sure that our body's getting enough of what it needs, okay? I hope you've learned something. I'll also pop in the chat my Instagram if you think of any questions that come to mind later on in the week. I'm always happy to talk to you about them and to help you out in any way I can. All right. Have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves. Melburnians were almost there with lockdown. But otherwise, enjoy your training and eat well and stay healthy. All right.
Thank you.
Have a lovely night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.